Hello, my name is Dominic Caruso, and I am a senior majoring in accounting. This presentation examines how Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon has been interpreted by historians across different periods. Though the actual event was brief and possibly not dramatic in the moment, it became one of the most symbolically powerful actions in Roman history because of how later authors reshaped it. Ancient writers turned the crossing into a moment loaded with moral tension, symbolism, and political lessons, while modern historians interpret the event through strategic analysis, legal concerns, and the broader institutional collapse of the Republic. As we move through the ancient and modern accounts, we'll see how the Rubicon transformed from a small river into a cultural symbol of a decisive, irreversible decision. To understand the interpretations developed over time, it's important to begin with an historical background. In 49 BC, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his legion and violated Roman law. By doing this, he effectively declared civil war against the Senate and Pompey. It was a moment of enormous political risk and personal consequence, and it marked a point from which neither side could turn back from. The crossing itself may have been physically small, but the stakes surrounding it were immense. This context sets the stage for why later writers, both ancient and modern, felt compelled to elevate the event into something greater, assigning it symbolic and transformative meaning that went far beyond the historical action. Now, we will start with the ancient interpretations of the crossing of the Rubicon. First, we start with Plutarch. Plutarch presents Caesar's crossing as a deeply moral and psychological turning point. He emphasizes Caesar's hesitation, framing it as a moment where Caesar weighs ambition against duty and responsibility to Rome. This focus fits Plutarch's biographical method, which aims to reveal character through key decisions. By portraying the crossing as a moral struggle, he uses the episode to teach ethical lessons about leadership, ambition, and the burden of power. His goal isn't strict historical accuracy, but rather moral instruction. In his version, Caesar becomes a tragic figure whose moment of decision symbolizes the conflict between personal ambition and the welfare of the state. Next, we go to Suetonius. He takes a different approach, highlighting the theatrical side of Caesar's personality. He emphasizes Caesar's famous line, "The die is cast," suggesting that Caesar embraced the drama of the moment. Suetonius is more interested in the character quirks and public image than the actual moral dilemma. In his version, Caesar appears bold, confident, and calculated, someone who understands the symbolic power of his actions. Rather than presenting inner conflict, he focuses on the performance and spectacle of the event. This fits his broader style when he's a biographer of emperors, where he often explores the dramatic and sensational aspects of their behavior rather than strictly recounting the events in their full accuracy. Next is Appian. Appian's account takes a more political and pragmatic angle, similar to how the modern historians will be. Instead of focusing on the psychology or fate, he looks at the political tensions between Caesar, Pompey, and the Senate. For Appian, the crossing is not a sudden moral crisis, but a culmination of legal disputes, Senate pressure, and political maneuvering. He argues that the breakdown of the Republic institutions played a major role in pushing Caesar towards this action. This interpretation shifts blame from a single individual to a broader, failing political system. Appian's version helps us understand the crossing as a response to structural dysfunction rather than a purely personal choice that Caesar makes. Now, moving on to Lucan's account. His account is the most dramatic and poetic. He was an epic poet, and he transformed the Rubicon into a sacred boundary and the crossing into an act of cosmic violation. In his account, the river itself almost speaks, warning Caesar against crossing it. Caesar is driven by irrationality, furor. Lucan frames the event as a dark, foreboding moment that signals the collapse of Rome's moral and cosmic order. His portrayal emphasizes doom, fate, and the destructive nature of civil war. The Rubicon becomes not just a boundary, but a symbol of the universe shifting towards chaos. Cassius Dio combines elements of fatalism with practical political analysis. He portrays the Republic as already in decline, with the conflict becoming almost inevitable. Dio suggests that Caesar's actions were rational within a deteriorating political environment. It does not emphasize hesitation or dramatic declarations, but rather the broader forces that made civil war unavoidable. In his account, Caesar acts not as a reckless or overly ambitious figure, but as someone responding to circumstances shaped by years of corruption, instability, and political breakdown. His interpretations echo modern historical methods more than moralistic tones of earlier writers, such as Lucan. Overall, the ancient historians mark the Rubicon as a moral and symbolic boundary, where Caesar has a conflict between ambition and order. For the most part, their narratives are shaped more by symbolic meaning rather than accurate tellings of the event. Now we move on to the modern interpretations, starting with Luca Pezzi. Pezzi views the Rubicon crossing through a lens of constitutional crisis. He argues that Caesar faced the real possibility of persecution and political destruction if he returned to Rome without his army. In his analysis, Caesar's decision was more of a defensive move rather than an offensive move, where it was designed to protect his political position and legal security. He emphasized the structural instability of the late Republic, framing Caesar's choice as a reaction to a failing system rather than an act of pure ambition. His interpretation highlights the legal pressures and procedural breakdowns that made the crossing a rational, though dangerous, choice. Adrian Goldsworthy. He interprets Caesar's crossing as a calculated and political military decision. He argues that Caesar understood the risks surrounding his command and believed that his opponents would use the courts to destroy him. Goldsworthy places the crossing in the context of Roman ideas of dignitas, reputation, political survival. According to him, Senate's actions and Pompey's growing power left Caesar with little realistic choices. This approach focuses on the practical strategy rather than the symbolism, painting the crossing as a rational move in an increasingly polarized political environment. Now, for Tom Holland's account. He offers a more narrative-driven interpretation, emphasizing the drama and symbolism similar to many of the ancient historians. And he presents the crossing as a moment that captures the decline of the Roman Republic and the rise of charismatic individual leadership. He highlights Caesar's political theater, his ability to turn decisive actions into powerful statements. Although grounded in historical analysis, his interpretation reads the events as part of a larger story about Rome's transformation. For him, the Rubicon is both an historical event and a symbolic breaking point that resonates through cultural memory. Christian Meyer focuses on long-term structural explanations. He argues that the Republic had been in decline for decades, and that the political institutions no longer functioned effectively. In this environment, Caesar's crossing became inevitable, not because of personal ambition, but because the system could no longer contain the political conflicts that it was. Meyer emphasizes the failure of compromise, the breakdown of norms, the systemic pressures that pushed Caesar towards creating a civil war within Rome. His interpretations frame Caesar's decision as a product of institutional decay rather than as a whim of the moment, singular dramatic event. The modern historians share very similar beliefs throughout, where they focus on Caesar's strategy and that he was forced into the decision, or more mostly forced into the decision, rather than Caesar having a spur of the moment, dramatic theater-like event of the crossing of the Rubicon. They focus on the institutional collapse of Rome and how Caesar's acting within a broken political framework. However, they still agree that the Rubicon is a major symbolic event of Rome, even if it was a strategical decision by Caesar. In conclusion, the crossing of the Rubicon became far more than a physical act. It was a symbol that shaped centuries of interpretation. Ancient accounts infused the event with moral lessons, cosmic warnings, and insights into Caesar's character, while modern historians focus more on the political strategy and the structural collapse of Rome. The evolution of these interpretations show how historical events gain symbolic meaning through their storytelling. Ultimately, Rubicon presents a moment where choice becomes unavoidable and irreversible. By comparing the ancient and modern perspectives, we gain deeper understandings to not only that of Caesar, but also how history itself has constructed and transformed this event throughout time.